Well, hello, everybody. Winter Conference 2024. I'm Dr. Doug Sullivan, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. And I know I say this to you every time I get to come teach a class to you, but I think I've got a great one today. And it's because I think it is a great one. It really is. In fact, the topic of my conversation today is something that all of you listening in today can take into the office on Monday and put straight into application in one way or another. And because I know there's a lot of other speakers that are all here today as well, I want to get right into using my time. So let's jump in and let me tell you the topic of my conversation with you today. The title of my talk is called Tell Them Your Value. Tell them your value. But I'm going to take this and put an interesting little twist on it. Tell them your value so that you can take a proactive approach to tackling the cancellation and no-show issue that might be going on in your office. Now, everybody, I say might be going on in your office, but I've been watching this over the last year, and I'll bet you've seen this too. In general, I'm noticing that cancellations and no-shows of scheduled visits are on the rise. Have you noticed? Now, I'm going to speculate here a little bit, but I think I'm right with this. I think the reason for this, at least in part, is a societal shift that we're experiencing these days, where the value of a commitment is going down. Yeah, the value of a commitment is going down. And I think that is because there are so many things that are rushing at people these days. We can thank that for the social media and the high volume of news and just all the challenges of the world. And so there are so many things coming at people and so many more things demanding an assignment of value that commitments that they've made have less value than they used to. And so therefore, people see less of a reason to come to their appointments. Now, listen, can we change social media? Can we change the challenges that are facing our society as a whole? No, but I sure love the question that we can ask ourselves, which is, what can we control? What can we control? And there's actually a lot that we control. But let's start out this conversation by really asking a question. So, why do patients cancel their visits or just simply not show up to start with? Well, we coaches have asked you this, and here's some of the answers that we're getting. You say they cancel because they feel better, because they say they can't afford it, because they say they don't have time to make the visits that they have scheduled with you. They cancel because they don't understand why they need to come back. They say they have other things to do, or maybe even that they've forgotten about the visit. Now, here's my question to you. Are these things right? I mean, is this really why people are canceling or no-showing their visits in your office? Well, I'm going to say the answer is yes. It really is right. And the reason that it's right is because it's their perspective of value. These are all excuses based on your patient's values. In other words, their appointment with you was less valuable to them than their fill in the blank, their money, their time, their effort, their energy. And now I think that prompts a conversation that we need to have about value. What is value anyway? Well, it turns out we can define value in two different ways. We can define it first as a verb, and the verb definition of value is to estimate the monetary worth of something. In other words, we could say the adjustment is valued at $50. And this isn't wrong. And in fact, this is where I think a lot of us go when we're thinking about value in our chiropractic office. We're thinking about it from a monetary standpoint, but I'd like to propose that we take that definition and toss it over our shoulder. Let's think about the noun definition of value instead. This one is really more applicable for giving us something that we can control. The noun definition of value is the regard that something is held to deserve, the importance it has, the usefulness it has, or the worth it has. We can say the adjustment is of great value, it's of great importance, or great usefulness. Now, with that in mind, how does that definition of value impact our patients? Well, simply this. People will buy or invest in or tend to those things or those products or those services that they perceive to have a high value. Your patients are going to prioritize their scheduled visits with you based on the level of value they perceive those visits to have. Remember, value meaning the level of importance they perceive, the level of usefulness they perceive those visits to have. And here's where I bring in Apollo 13. Houston, we have a problem. And I'll say that core value number 2 here at Integrity Doctors actually helps us define our problem. Let's take a look at a snippet of core value number 2. In part, it says, the public doesn't know chiropractic. They don't know how to say it, how to spell it, and they definitely don't know how well it works. They need to know the tremendous healing power of chiropractic. We've got to stop being so quiet and bashful about the value of chiropractic care. We must stop fooling ourselves and thinking they already know how great chiropractic is and know how great their results that come from the chiropractic adjustment are going to be. Here's the question. How are they going to know if we don't tell them? And there's the context for our conversation today, everybody. We have to tell our patients the value of chiropractic. We've got to tell them what the value is. And listen, doctors, but really everybody, this doesn't start and end with the report of findings. And I bring this up because I'm afraid that so many of you out there think we tell them the value in the report of findings. That's why we spend so much time with it. And you're right. The report of findings provides us with the foundation of the value of the chiropractic adjustment. But it doesn't end there. You've got to keep telling your patients the value of chiropractic care over and over and over and over again. You might remember that I talked to you about this back in the Summer Spectacular 2023 class that I taught called The Secret Sauce of the Integrity System. In that class, I brought to you the idea that there are 2 principles that we have to land on when communicating value to our patients. It's repetition and it's consistency of your message. Repetition and consistency. And why are those 2 principles so important? Well, there's both a simple reason and a complex reason that I brought to you in that class. I said the simple reason that repetition and consistency are so important is they keep your message in front of your patients. They keep a top of mind awareness of your message, which is your value proposition to your patients. And the complex reason is when you are repetitive and consistent about the things that you're saying to your patient, you trigger these deeply emotional and psychological responses that do a number of things to the human brain, including giving off a high perception of value. So you're giving your value proposition, you're doing it over and over and over again, and they begin to perceive it as having high value. But since I taught that class, I've had a lot of people say to me, is this really true? Can repeating a simple message over and over and over and saying the same words consistently really increase the perceived value of a thing or a service or a product? Well, I tell you what, let's do today. Let's talk about lobsters. Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about lobsters. I like to get out of the chiropractic office from time to time and talk about some real world examples. So let's talk about lobsters. Have you ever heard that term, beauty is in the eye of the beholder? I might substitute the word value there. Value is in the eye of the beholder. Turns out that statement's been around with us for more than a century now. It actually came out of a novel from about 1878 called Molly Bawn. Value is in the eye of the beholder, and indeed it is when we're talking about lobsters. I mean, look at this thing that I have on the screen here for you. I mean, it's kind of this weird amalgam of a spider with those spindly legs and a crab with those big old nasty pinchers. And then it's got this sort of fish tail and these big old long antenna and beady eyes. It's hard to see any beauty or value in this thing when that's all you can see. But let's dig into lobsters just a little bit more, shall we? Let's talk about where the word lobster came from anyway. Well, turns out that lobster is from the old English words of lape, which translates to be spider, or lapestre, which translates to be locust. Oof, we're not doing a whole lot of good for value here yet, are we? Well, it turns out, you guys, back in the 1600s, lobsters were so abundant as they were considered to be regular staple of food for prisoners and servants. I mean, that's pretty much all they were given to. And even as we move into the 1700s, they would wash up on the shore and be gathered up by the poor of the cities along the East Coast in the U.S. They were considered to actually be low-class food. Low-class food, these lobsters, and why not? They're kind of a mix between a spider and a crab with those beady, nasty eyes. And, even if we get into the 1800s, canned lobster could be bought for about 11 cents a pound. Compare that to a can of Boston baked beans at that time, which was 53 cents a pound. Interesting, it turns out that if you went to someone's home and there were lobster shells scattered about either on the inside or the outside, it was actually considered a sign of poverty. Yep, still hard to see the beauty or the value in these things yet, isn't it? But then something happened as we got into the late 1800s. America was expanding west. The railroads were moving away from the East Coast and into the interior of the country, and they needed foods, exotic foods that they could attract people onto the railroads. And so the rail industry actually rebranded how lobsters were thought about. They actually served them in the dining cars as a exotic dish. And people started thinking differently about lobsters. Whereas they were first served as cheap side dishes on restaurant tables, they actually progressed into the late 1800s and early 1900s to be main course upper class dinners. Now, again, nothing changed with the lobster, but it was how it was being presented. And as it was being presented as this more exotic dish, this more high-class dish, the prices began to rise. The reverence with which the lobster dinner was held began to rise. And as treats for our troops overseas during the World Wars, we would serve them lobster. Again, a delicacy when just 100 years earlier, it was being served to prisoners and considered a low-class meal. Now it was served as something to celebrate. And even as we get into present day now, I mean, there's the 18% increase in the price of lobster even over the last decade. In 2014, lobster was $7.95 a pound. Now remember, everybody, It was 11 cents a pound back in the 1700s. What changed? Still the same old spidery, gross-looking thing. I don't know if you call it a fish or what that is. Still food, still tastes the same, still comes from the same place. What changed about the lobster? Its perceived value, that's what changed. It was regularly and purposely presented as having high value. And the consumer just followed the lead from what they were being told. And from there, we went from easy to get, 11 cents a pound, to hard to get, $7.95 a pound. Value, both verb and noun, go up for lobsters. So let's make the connection back to the chiropractic office now, shall we? What does increasing the perceived value of lobsters have to do with lowering your patient's cancellation and no-show rate? Well, everybody, I want you to consider what you're asking your patients to do when you propose a treatment plan to them. You're asking them to come multiple visits per week. You're asking them to take time out of work and away from their commitments. You're asking them to commute to and from your office. You're asking them to pay for services, and you're asking them to trust a process or a service that they don't yet fully understand. Sounds kind of pinchy, doesn't it? Sounds kind of lobstery, doesn't it? And when all that stuff gets thrown at people, they've got to start making value decisions based on all the other stuff that's getting thrown at them from social media and their family and the rest of the world and all the responsibilities they have. And unfortunately, all these things, their time, their energy, their money, their effort, have higher perceived value than chiropractic. I want you to remember, we only see about 16% of the population, which means that 84% of the population isn't talking about us, doesn't know what we do, doesn't have a value of us. So when people first come in our door, they may hear us in the report of findings, but they don't yet have value. All these other things have value. And after a little bit of time going by, and they're still coming to see you, and they have to keep evaluating value of everything they've got going on in their lives, the excuses start to come out. They feel better. They can't afford it anymore. They don't have the time to come see you. They don't understand why they need to come back to see you. They have other things to do. They forgot about the visit. At least that's the excuses that they give. But the truth is, they just valued other things like their time, their money, their work, their other commitments way more than chiropractic, which is your lobster. So everybody, we've got to consider how we demonstrate our value to our patients if we are to get them to keep coming back. We need them to value the work that we're doing for them above the other things that demand their constant attention. So let's take some proactive approaches to this. Today, I'd like to talk to you about two of them. The first proactive approach comes straight out of the title of my conversation with you today. It's called Tell Them the Value of Chiropractic. Now, I'd like to anchor this with a quote that I found from Pastor T.D. Jakes from Potter House, there it is, in Dallas, Texas. Now, it's a two-part quote. I'll give you the first part here. He said, "Your words will tell others what you think. Your words will tell others what you think." Now, we already established here that we've got to be repetitive and consistent if we want people to hear our message, right? And yes, the words in our report of findings set the foundation for understanding the value of chiropractic, but we've got to build on that, everybody. Doctors, let me start by talking to you here today. You've got to tell your patients every time you see them, that's every visit, what the value of chiropractic is for them. And those of you that coach with me on a regular basis, your eyes are rolling up in your head right now because you're saying, oh no, here he goes again. He's going to talk about point number 3 of the 6-point office visit. Yes, I am. Yes, I am, because that's where our value proposition is first built into an everyday conversation, doctors, and you know what this is, don't you? Let's do it together. There are 3 things that are happening with your adjustment. First, we're removing the nerve interference so that your body has 100% capacity to heal itself from your current pain and even other sicknesses. And second, we're removing nerve interference so that your body has 100% capacity to prevent future sickness and pain, so you don't get as much sickness in the first place. And third, Mrs. Smith, we're removing the nerve interference for your future performance so that your musculoskeletal system doesn't experience so much wear and tear from misalignment. Point number 3 of the 6-point office visit. This is our core message, everybody. This is our basic value proposition. Now, why do we do this? What does it matter if we're repetitive and consistent about those words? Well, this is what we want our patients thinking about when they start thinking, do I have the time to go to my visit today? Do I want to spend the money on the adjustment today? Do I want to get my adjustment or hang out with my friends or my family or just spend time by myself and not go anywhere? Those are the questions that start getting asked every day when they're evaluating the value of the things they've got to do, which includes you. And everybody, your patients must have heard the heal, prevent, future performance message enough times that right after they ask themselves those questions, they answer themselves with, I want to heal, or oh, I want to prevent that problem from coming back, or I want to have better future performance. You are relying on that being in their mind as an answer, because if it isn't, then especially once their pain is gone, there's nothing for them to fall back on that gives the adjustment value. Pain's a motivator, but when pain's no longer there and they don't really yet totally understand chiropractic or what it's doing for them, what else do they have? They've got to have your words. And thus, if there's no words repeating in their head, they make the higher value choice, at least for them, towards time, towards money, towards energy, and not towards chiropractic. And speaking of pain, doctors, still with you. Staff, I promise I'm coming to you. Haven't forgotten you. But doctors, when you're talking with your patients at each visit, let's stop making every visit they have with you about their pain. Only talking about their pain leads your patients to naturally put value in the presence or the absence of pain in relation to needing you. See, it's just like allopathic care or medical care. The thinking has been ingrained in our entire society. If you've got a pain, you need a pill. When that pain is gone, you don't need that pill anymore. And that's how they come in thinking about chiropractic. If you've got a pain, you need an adjustment. If you don't have a pain, you don't need an adjustment. Everybody, if we have them always focused on pain, when that pain's gone, you're in trouble. Now, I know that when they first come in the door, right, the first point of the 6-point office visit says, ask them how they are. And they're probably going to tell you how they're doing in terms of their pain. That's fine. Let them do that. That's how they've been conditioned by life. But doctors, in point number 2, eliminate the word pain. Point number 2 is tell them how they are. Tell them how they are from a functional conversation rather than a symptomatic conversation. Talk to them about their restricted or improved motion, about their changes in posture, about their muscle tension, about how they change the way they walk in the door or walk out the door. Guide them to see, everybody, that chiropractic is for much more than just pain relief. And then we've got to be really repetitive and consistent about this as well. For each individual patient, when you see them each time, doctors, pick one or two of those functional items that you're using to evaluate them and tell them how they are, and tell them how they are with one or two of those things every time you see them. And why do we need to do that? Well, again, I want you to remember this secret sauce, this repetition, this consistency. See, when they're hearing you constantly talk to them about their muscle tension or about their restriction or improvement in motion, it has a simple effect on them of keeping it in the top of their mind, right? It's always right there in the top of their mind when they're thinking about you and about your importance. And the complex impact of being repetitive and consistent about that conversation is it triggers these emotional and psychological responses that make them perceive you to have a high value. Yep, goes way beyond just what we might think is happening to deep inside their emotional and their psychological mind. See, everybody, on the day that your patient's pain is gone, and then every day thereafter, you need them waking up and assessing the value of coming and getting another adjustment from the function it brings them, not the pain relief. Because if pain is their value and they feel good, you move to the bottom of the value list, and you're probably not going to see them for that scheduled visit. And here come the excuses. They're not going to tell you they don't value you. They're going to tell you they feel better, or they can't afford it anymore, or they don't have the time, or they got other things to do, and all the other excuses that come out because it's embarrassing to say they don't value you anymore. So everybody, your words will tell others what you think, but you've got to use your words repetitively and consistently. Now, what's the other proactive approach to going after the cancellation and no-show levels that seem to be on the rise in our offices? And you might say, wait a minute, Doug, you already said that. Yeah, tell them the value of chiropractic, but do it with your actions. Not just with your words, but with your actions. Now, going back to T.D. Jakes' quote again, let's add in the second part. Your words will tell others what you think. Your actions will tell them what you believe. See, we have to show our patients our belief. We have to believe that chiropractic is the right thing for them, but maybe I better actually just start with asking everybody on the class today, do you believe that the recommendation of care that your doctor has given your patients is the right thing? Some people will ask, well, what is a right treatment plan? Well, I'll take a bet because I coach a lot of you, and so I've looked inside of a lot of your practices, but I've also read all the research, and I can tell you that I'll bet when you first see a new patient, it includes them coming multiple times a week, right? Maybe 2 times a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, maybe more. Some of you that might be new to the practice, right? Some of you new team members, you might be saying, well, do they really need that? Is that really even right? Yeah, it's right. There's loads and loads and loads of research out there telling us that we must see people multiple times early on in their care to get good improvement, from journals in all types of medicine, the British Medical Journal, Spine, JMPT, the World Health Organization. It's well established that we need to see patients many times in a short amount of time to get their body moving right again. And so, team, your doctors, knowing that research and knowing what works well, your doctors are going to give your patients the whole recommendation that they need to get better, right, doctors? The whole thing. We're going to attack the problem with the recommendation. Doctors, no weak recommendations, right? No long-standing problems coming in or severe problems coming in, and then we give a teeny-weeny, wimpy treatment plan, right? Things like somebody's had an issue for 13 years and they get, 2 times a week for a couple weeks, or somebody comes in bent over to the side with an 8 or a 9 out of a 10 pain scale and you adjust them 1 or 2 times a week for a week or so, right? Doctors, we're making that recommendation of everything they need to get after their problem. We can always pull it back later. So team, this is what your doctors are doing. They're not recommending 1 visit more than what's needed, but they're not recommending 1 less either. And then team, when that recommendation has been given to the patient in the report of findings, you have to schedule all of the patient's acute care, all of it. And that includes every visit, all the procedures that are going to be associated with those visits, including the wellness reports. And then when they get to wellness, we're going to schedule all of their wellness, schedule their wellness visits, even if it's once a month for the year. We're going to schedule it all because your actions tell your patients what you believe. When you take the steps of not saying, would you like to schedule those, but instead look at Mrs. Smith and say, we're going to schedule those visits that Dr. Sullivan has recommended, you're showing your belief that this is the right thing for them. And then you've got to tell them that you mean it. And by tell them, I mean, you've got to show them. Team, if Mrs. Smith calls to cancel an appointment, you've got to stop letting it be okay. You'll see on the slide here, I said, your words and your tone matter, sweetie. I was making fun of one of my Oklahoma clients the other day because I could actually hear one of the team members in the background talking to somebody who had obviously called in to cancel a visit. And she said, it's okay, sweetie. We'll see you next time. No. It's not okay. Your actions matter, team. Don't lose that visit. Guide them to make up the visit, not because we've just given you a rule that says you have to, but because you believe that it's right and you believe they need to make it up to get better. If they call to cancel an appointment and call in and say something like, I'm not going to make my appointment today, the answer is not, okay. The answer instead is, oh, we totally understand busy schedules, and therefore we always keep a couple of appointment spots open to accommodate our busy patients. Let's just change that time today for you. Let's do 5 today, or let's do 9 tomorrow morning, and we'll keep it quick for you. It's never okay. Offer a makeup spot, team. Don't lead them to think that we gave a recommendation of care that we didn't mean because we meant it, right? By leading them to do what you believe is right for them, you're showing them the high value of your service through leading your actions. Now, if Mrs. Smith just doesn't show up, and this happens more and more, don't they, team? Where they just don't call you, they just don't show. Right? You didn't get a warning. They're just not there. Well, we know and we have procedures for this. Call them immediately within 10, 15 minutes of the missed visit. Call them and then call them again shortly thereafter. And then call them tonight and then call them tomorrow. And you say, but she never answers. I know, but she sees it. She knows you're calling and you're saying by your actions, we missed you and we're out to make sure we get this made up. Text them. Do the same thing. I know more people work on text now. Text them right away. Text them a little bit later. Text them tonight. Text them tomorrow. Let them know you noticed they went missing. And I know the response. I said it just a second ago. Nobody ever answers their phone or their texts anymore. Doesn't matter. Your actions show them you noticed. Your actions show your patients that you believe they need that visit. And this increases their perception of the value of your service. And then, doctor, If your team wasn't able to get a hold of Mrs. Smith, and it's likely that they won't be able to, when she shows up on Wednesday after that missed Monday visit, and she should show up because she's advanced multiple scheduled, right, team? When Mrs. Smith shows up, you've got to lead her to make up that visit. It is not okay, doctors, to ignore that she missed on Monday and then just do 2 more visits this week rather than the 3 you had her scheduled for. It's not okay for you to say, well, you missed on Monday. Oh, well, lay down, let's get adjusted. That is making it okay, doctors. Lead her to get it made up. If she missed on Monday, you say to her, well, this is not good, Mrs. Smith. You've got too much time between your adjustments. That's going to derail your healing. We got to get you back on track. I'm going to see you today. I'm glad you're here. We're going to see you on Friday, just like you're scheduled for, and we're going to put an extra visit in tomorrow, which is Thursday. So she still gets her 3 times, not because we're trying to make up some number, but because we believe that those adjustments have to be close together in the beginning to get her well. Doctors, your actions show Mrs. Smith that you noticed that she missed and that you believe she needs to get those visits done. Lead her to do it. When you lead her to make these visits up, this increases her perception of the value of your service. Now listen, she may or may not actually commit to that makeup. She may have other things going on. She may push back at you and you may ultimately not get it made up. But the fact that you led her to do it, that you told her you saw it, and that you believe it's the right thing for her to do to get that visit done, to get back on track, you're showing her your belief. Now, team, doctors, this approach is simple, but I understand it's not necessarily easy. You're going to have to do this multiple times a day and maybe even multiple times with an individual patient. Repetition and consistency of some simple phrases. And it's going to require you to show your belief in your recommendations of care through your scheduling. But you're your own worst enemy here, everybody. Because you're going to say things like, our patients are tired of hearing that point number 3 in the 6-point office visit. You feel too robotic when you're saying those words, doctors. I hear that from you all the time. You're going to say, oh, a few simple words won't make any difference whether I do them or not. Team, you're going to say those phone calls and texts do nothing but annoy patients. They don't actually show them your belief. Doctors, you're going to say, recommending a makeup visit feels too confrontational. I know. I've heard all these things before. But we answer how to address these in your own mind in a couple of our core values. Let's go back to core value number 2 again real quick as we begin to close out our class here today. Core value number 2 proposes a question. How are they going to know the value if we don't tell them? It's not like they can read it in the paper or hear it from a friend or see it on TV or see it on social media. And even if they do once or twice hear something positive about chiropractic, how many more times are they hearing negative stuff or medical stuff that's brought to you by Pfizer? Right? And you know, I'm only half kidding here. That's the world that they're living in and being pushed by. You've got to tell them what your value is, or somebody else will do it for you, and they're not going to tell them your value. They're going to tell them theirs. And there's also core value number 5, everybody. It's responsibility. I speak to everybody when I read to you from core value 5. This job is for those who want to do more than just fulfill tasks. You want to make a difference. You want to make an impact to the world and leave a positive mark on society. This job isn't for the mediocre or the indifferent. This isn't for people who don't care. This is for the big-hearted, for the excellent, for the caring. This is for the great ones. Little bit of repetition, little bit of consistency, and a whole lot of showing what you believe. And we can cancel this cancellation no-show rate that's climbing in our offices if we'll only tell them our value. Thanks so much, everybody, for letting me spend time with you in this winter live stream conference. I hope you're having a great day, and I know we've got great classes for you today, so I'm going to get out of the way and let the person who's coming up after me get into your office, into your home, and into your heads for a while. Thanks so much for spending time with me, everybody. Have a great day.